change the laws, because anyone, I said to you, I could be arrested for inciting Australian people to become a republic. And it's excuse me, it is sedition, it's insurrection. It is insurrection.
She makes herself sound like she's, one step away from jail.
I repeat it again, it's insurrection. Now, he doesn't even know the wording: insurrection, rebellion, treason, and attempting to overthrow the government.
No, it's called being a drama queen. That's what it's called, being a drama queen. You being a drama queen again. Pretending you can be put in jail for inciting a republic. What a joke.
I'll tell you what this individual does. Do you know what he does?
Don't talk about me with
downloads pornographic material and he palms it off around here to young girls. I've never seen anything. And any girl that walks around here, I'd advise her to have a chastity belt, because there's not a woman safe within yards of people. Now you're going to get more.
It's a funny one-liner. That's not the truth, but it's funny.
Tried
to
kidnap
funny one.
that young girl last week.
That's
a young innocent girl. And you wolf, you tried to put the hard word on her. Took advantage of her.
That's right.
You know, there's laws against...
she was 21. What are you talking about?
There should be a law against...
All right, I acknowledge the fact that the terrorist laws are unjust, but who passed those laws? A parliament, yes, a parliament elected by Australian people. These are people that represent your interests. If in fact the British are being so oppressive, it would have been them who passed those laws. The point I'm trying to get across is that in many ways we already are Australian, and I believe that there isn't going to be much significant change, or our lifestyles are not going to be very significantly changed by becoming a republic. The laws are passed by the people who represent you, and so they represent Australian interests. That is what I'd like to say at this point.
I will say to you, with any brains, Australia will become a republic. That means there'll be no monarch, there'll be no queen, we don't recognise her. The oath of allegiance at the present moment, when you become an Australian citizen, you swear allegiance to the Queen of Australia by the Howard government. Under the new Australian Labor government, you swear allegiance to the Australian people. You swear allegiance to the Australian people and not to a foreign queen in England, which is a descendant of German blood of the House of Hanover. The royal family of German. Did they tell you that? The royal family of German are German. Every one of them. Yes, the House, and that comes from Queen Victoria's grandson, who was the Kaiser of Germany before the outbreak of the First World War with not the Nazis, the Germans, which used to be Prussian. Yes, King George, well, he couldn't speak a word of English. He was on the throne of England. Who do you think caused the Civil War in America? A British general by the name of George Washington. He spoke fluent German, and George Washington was a British general who incited the American people to become constituted what you have today. In other words, it was a British general who was in the red coats and believed that America was unjustly wrong. And the British burnt down the first American Congress in Boston. They burnt it down and they dressed up as Indians. Listen how disgusting they were. The poor Indians got the blame that they were American colonial who got all the British tea and threw it into the harbour, and that was the birth of America's independence. But it was British interference again, the same here. They interfere. Then, because I speak like this, oh, you're shocking. You should be arrested. We'll get the police to arrest you. The only police they can get to arrest me for sedition and insurrection and rebellion are the federal police, the AFP. Because those statues, and you might say, well, the Victorian police act as agent, law enforcement.
They wouldn't bother.
AFP,
the only people you have to worry about.
Perry Mason, I don't need you and your Perry Mason advice. Thank you very much.
No.
What comes out of your
the only people you need to worry about
you've got a tongue like a gunner. You want to hear it?
Are the people from the mental home where you escape when they come to get you back.
And if I see them...
No, when the people from the mental asylum come back, they're the ones you have to worry about.
Oh, that's not nice.
That's true. You don't have to worry about the police.
The American Revolution. Now, I believe that was started with a tax on tea. Now, that tax, I believe, was very reasonable. That tax was to raise money for troops in America to defend against the Indian incursions, which the Americans weren't very keen on. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that it was a reasonable tax, and I don't believe it was too bad, but the Americans rebelled. It wasn't to blame them. They had a war against the Indians. That was in 1773, if I'm not mistaken. But in the wars before that, and General Washington served in these wars, it was American wars against Indian. It wasn't a British... Indeed he was, but these wars were fought against the Indians because the American people wanted to fight them, because the American people wanted to encroach on their land. Now, attacks to raise troops for that purpose, I believe, was very reasonable, but the Americans decided that they'd rather dump the tea in the harbour. Well, I believe that's a pretty reasonable attempt at taxation.
What this young chap is saying, when the Americans, the newborn Americans, dumped, which were British subjects, remember this, they were British until the tea incident. The German king, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth's great-great-grandfather, the British House of Windsor, which is really the House of Hanover, they decided to dump the tea as a sarcastic attempt to embarrass the British government. That is what they did it for when they dumped all that tea. In other words, we're not going to drink your tea, we're going to throw it into the water, and that's exactly what they did. You say it's not as great as what I'm putting, the argument or the debate. That is what you're saying to myself.
Well, for a start, that tea wasn't exactly imposed on the Americans. The ships were in the harbour. Now, on your little note of British dressing up as Indians and burning the first Parliament, well, the Americans did the same. They dressed up as Indians and dumped British tea in the harbour. Now, I don't know, but they weren't forced to buy that tea. Americans had choice. Do they want to buy tea? They don't have to. But no, they decided to dump it in Boston Harbour instead. They had a choice about that tea, but they'd rather destroy it. And when the British asked for compensation for that from the Boston government, then the whole country went up in revolt. Now, I think they were pretty reasonable demands. I think it isn't fair to be dumping a trader's supply of tea when he's not forcing you to buy it. Now, I believe that was once again, a reasonable demand from the British government. But that was attacked with aggressiveness and hostility by the growing Continental Congress.
Excuse me, Gary, do you have the time, please?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've still got a bit of time. I'm only asking because the library is closing. I've only got a few minutes. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying with any person who fears, and even people who support some of my argument, believe that the monarchy is a stable system of government. That is why they retain the monarchy. However, when you look at it from a business point of view and when you look at it from independence, and a lot of people want to cling to Mother England, and they